Water is almost gone. Not low. Not concerning. Gone. 3%. That is all that remains inside Elephant Butte Reservoir, the primary water supply for 3 million people. And right now, this summer, the riverbed it was built to feed is nothing but cracked, bleached dust stretching more than 50 miles through the heart of New Mexico. The Rio Grande ran dry. Not for a weekend. Not for a mile. For more than 50 continuous miles, one of the great rivers of North America simply ceased to exist in the summer of 2024. A river that carved its path 4 million years ago, that outlasted ice ages, that witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, reduced to a scar in the desert floor running straight through the center of Albuquerque, a city of 600,000 people, whose downtown skyline now looks out over nothing but cracked earth where water used to move. But that was only the beginning. The San Juan Chama Project, the emergency tunnel drilled straight through the Continental Divide to pipe Colorado River water into New Mexico when the Rio Grande couldn't deliver, just recorded its lowest allocation in history. The backup plan is failing. And the backup plan to the backup plan does not exist. In 2025, the Bureau of Reclamation issued a zero allocation to entire irrigation districts. Not a reduced allocation. Zero. Families who have farmed the same ground for 4 generations were told there was no water. The Hatch Valley, a stretch of earth so productive it grows more green chili per acre than anywhere on the planet, is sitting empty this summer. The equipment isn't running. The seasonal workers didn't come. The fields are silent. In 2023, before the emergency reserve failed, before the zero allocations, New Mexico was ordered to pay Texas $144 million for water it had promised and never delivered. That wasn't the crisis. That was just the first bill arriving before the collapse. And here is the detail that changes everything, the one piece of information that reframes every drought headline you have ever read about the American Southwest. Scientists no longer call what is happening here a drought. They have a different word for it now. That word is aridification. And aridification does not mean a bad season. It does not mean a dry stretch waiting for the rains to return. It means a permanent shift in the baseline. The climate is not swinging toward dry. It has already moved there. It has settled in. What was once a wet period that engineers used to design water law and dam capacity turned out to be an anomaly. And the anomaly is over. The river that survived ice ages is running out of water. The reservoir built to save it is at 3%. And no one told you how long this has been building. Let me walk you through the timeline. In 1906, the United States signed a treaty with Mexico guaranteeing 60,000 acre-feet of Rio Grande water every single year. Not contingent on rainfall. Not conditional on snowpack. Guaranteed regardless of what the river actually had to give. In 1938, the Rio Grande Compact divided the river among Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. That compact was written during some of the wettest decades in the recorded history of the American West, decades that turned out to be a statistical outlier sitting far above the true long-term average. Engineers looked at an anomaly and called it normal. They built an entire legal architecture around it. In 1944, a second international treaty obligated Mexico to send 350,000 acre-feet back northward from tributaries inside Chihuahua. Through the 1970s and 80s, the system held. Through the 1990s, the refills started coming up short. In 2013, Elephant Butte dropped to roughly 3% for the first time in modern memory. Then the rains came back and the headlines stopped, and nobody changed the math. By the end of 2024, the reservoir was below 3% again. In 2025, the emergency reserve failed at the same time. And right now, the riverbed running through the largest city in New Mexico is dust. This is where it changes. Here is the geography that makes this a continental emergency, not a regional inconvenience. The river begins in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, more than 12,000 feet above sea level. Snowpack melts off those peaks and flows south. It passes through the Rio Grande Gorge, an 800-foot canyon sliced through solid basalt north of Taos, before reaching Albuquerque. 125 miles south of the city, the water arrives at Elephant Butte, a 301-foot concrete gravity dam built between 1911 and 1916, the largest man-made reservoir in the world at the time of its completion. At full pool, that reservoir stretched 40 miles behind the dam and held 2.19 million acre-feet of water, enough to bury the entire island of Manhattan under more than 60 feet of liquid. Below the dam, the Hatch Valley, a town of 1,700 people and the green chili capital of the planet. Then Las Cruces. Then El Paso, sitting across the border from Ciudad Juarez. Together, a combined urban population of more than 2 million people sharing a single water source. Then the river bends east and becomes the entire southern boundary of Texas, tracing 1,254 miles of international border before crossing into the Mexican states of Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas. 6 states, 2 nations, 1 river, no backup. Now here is why the system is collapsing, and why it is happening faster than the models predicted. Roughly 70% of the Rio Grande's annual flow comes from snowpack in the Colorado Rockies and the mountains of northern New Mexico. When winters run warm, the snowpack thins. When springs arrive early, the melt races off too fast, and too much of it evaporates straight off the soil before it ever reaches the river channel. July water is becoming March vapor. The mountain reservoirs that were supposed to catch and hold that water are receiving less of it every year, and losing more of it to a warmer, thirstier atmosphere on the way down. And it gets worse. Elephant Butte at 3% is approaching the threshold where its outflow gates can no longer physically move water. This is called dead pool. It is the point at which gravity stops cooperating before the reservoir visually empties. Before the basin even looks dry, the engineering stops functioning. The water becomes unreachable. On top of that, the 1906 treaty still demands 60,000 acre-feet per year for Mexico whether the water physically exists or not. The 1938 compact still divides water between 3 states that is no longer there to divide. And the courts, when the states fight over it, and they do fight, assign blame instead of water. The San Juan Chama Project, the tunnel under the Continental Divide that was supposed to be the emergency override, just hit its record low allocation. Underneath all of it, the basin has warmed by 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the past century. The Rio Grande's natural flow, independent of dams, independent of irrigation withdrawals, just the raw water moving through the channel, has declined by more than 25% since 1980. 1/4 of the river is simply gone. Not diverted, not dammed. Evaporated into a warmer atmosphere that is now consuming water faster than the mountains can produce it. These threats are not arriving one after another. They are colliding right now. The cascade has already started. More than 1.5 million acres of farmland across Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas hold legal water rights to pull from this river. In 2024, the Elephant Butte Irrigation District delivered roughly half a normal allocation. In 2025, entire districts received 0.6 million people on the U.S. side of the basin and another 1.5 million across the border in Ciudad Juarez are each protected by legal agreements that assume a river flow that no longer exists. In the Hatch Valley, a 4th-generation chili farmer said it plainly, "We did not lose a bad year. We lost everything we planted, everything we planned, and we still do not know what next year looks like. The farm equipment is not running this summer. The seasonal workers did not come. The restaurants, the gas stations, the hardware stores that depend on a functioning agricultural economy, all of them are watching revenue collapse while they wait for an explanation that no one has delivered." Up in Albuquerque, city engineers built one of the most sophisticated aquifer storage and recovery systems in the country, pumping water underground during wet years to reclaim it in dry ones. Smart engineering, forward-thinking management, but the system depends on there being wet years. And there have not been many wet years. The University of New Mexico Water Resources Program has said it plainly. The state's water math no longer adds up. Now here is what no one told you about what comes next. The Bureau of Reclamation has run climate models projecting Elephant Butte's capacity through 2050. Under the middle-range scenario, the one most climate scientists currently consider most likely, the reservoir reaches functionally empty status within 15 to 20 years. Not 3%. Empty. A hole in the New Mexico desert where water used to be. And when that happens, farms without irrigation water do not slowly reduce production. They stop. Cities without their primary water source do not gradually cut back. They face an emergency. And the 1944 treaty will still demand Mexico send water north, from Chihuahua, where farmers have already protested violently against their own government for diverting the water their families need to survive. Congressional delegations have pushed. Diplomatic negotiations have produced nothing. The river does not care about the 1906 treaty. It does not care about the 1938 compact. It only has what it has. And what it has is shrinking. The question is no longer whether the system holds. The question is who gets the water that remains, and what happens to everyone else. No one has answered that question. No framework exists to answer it. The legal architecture was built for a river that no longer runs the way it did when the ink dried on those agreements. The riverbed is still dust. The reservoir is still at 3%. The snowpack is still arriving thinner every winter. The treaties are still demanding water that no longer exists. The gauges are still falling. The wells are still being drilled deeper, chasing an aquifer that does not recharge fast enough to keep up with the thirst above it. The fields are still empty, and the people downstream, 6 million on one side of the border, 1.5 million on the other, are still waiting for someone to stand in front of a camera and tell them the truth about what is coming. No one has done that yet.